drug tests are designed to detect and deter abuse of performance-enhancing drugs by competitors. Performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drug use are perhaps the greatest threat facing the integrity of sports, as well as the health and safety of today's athletes. In an attempt to protect their sports and athletes from this threat, athletic administrators and organizations at all levels have implemented drug testing programs. In their haste to rid sports of performance-enhancing drugs, however, some people have voiced their concern that sports and recreational organizations may be violating the privacy rights of the very athletes they're trying to protect. The main legal areas governing drug testing of athletes are constitutional law and labor law.
If a constitutional law issue arises, the first thing someone should do is ask, is the institution a state actor?
Labor law is associated with the employment of athletes. The collective bargaining agreement, otherwise known as an athlete's contract, addresses this. Drug testing can affect an athlete's employment if they test positive. Therefore, it must be included in the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes, Caleb, do you have a question?
Yeah, Ms. Roser, what's the Fourth Amendment?
I'm so glad you asked. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
All drug testing cases deal with the Fourth Amendment and people's right to privacy. In order for drug testing to be evaluated under the Fourth Amendment, a couple of factors need to be present.
The first factor is legitimate privacy expectation, which is basically the right of privacy that society sees as legitimate. The second is character of intrusion, which is basically just how the samples are monitored and collected. And the third factor is the nature and immediacy of the governmental concern, which is when the court determines whether the state's interest in conducting a drug test is important enough to justify an individual's genuine expectation of privacy.
The Fourth Amendment also requires that before there is a drug testing search, there must be probable cause.
The benchmark case that outlined all of these factors was Vernonia School District versus Acton in 1995. Acton, a young football player, was told to participate in a drug test in order to play. His parents, on the other hand, refused to sign the form, saying that it was against his rights according to the Fourth Amendment. The Supreme Court held that the drug testing of the athlete was reasonable of the Fourth Amendment. In other words, it did not violate his rights.
In Vernonia School District v. Acton, a 7th grader is challenging a school requirement that he take a drug test before playing on his junior high football team. For some background on the case, America and the Courts talked with Emilio Viano, who teaches a course involving drugs and the law at American University.
Professor Emilio Viano of American University here in Washington, D.C., what are the issues at stake in this case?
The major issues at stake are the right to privacy and the freedom from unreasonable searches and seizure. Here we have a youngster, James Acton, who wants to play in the school team, and the Vernonia School District decides that everyone who is going to be on the soccer team or on any other team has to undergo mandatory drug testing. James Acton and his family refuse. He is excluded from the sport. He decides to sue. The Court of First Instance sides with the school. The Court of Appeals in San Francisco sides with him. And now, surprisingly enough, actually, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have the last word.
There are two possible defenses against a positive drug test. One is due process. If a person thinks that their property or liberty has been adversely affected by a positive drug test, it may provide protection. The second one is state constitutions. An individual state constitution may afford more protection than the U.S. Constitution and may help provide some leeway.
There are many different types of organizations that handle with drug testing, including the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, NCAA, and the World Anti-Doping Agency. All of these may have the same protocols, but they will have different penalties and how they will handle an athlete who has tested positive for a drug test. What they're looking for when taking drug tests are steroids, anabolic agents, stimulants, and different types of blood doping.
For 20 years, the UCLA Olympic Analytical Laboratory has been at the center of the fight against doping. It is one of the world's largest sports drug testing facilities, examining 45,000 urine specimens a year. They are sorted and studied with some of the strictest guidelines. Scientists must be meticulous and precise, and it's that attention to detail that extends far beyond this lab. In fact, it starts before the athlete even fills that cup. How that bottle gets filled might not surprise you, but the process just might shock you.
The second you cross the finish line, there is a person there with a vest on that comes up that says, drug testing or drug tester or whatever it might be. They come up, they notify you that you've been selected for drug testing.
You then sign a piece of paper, and that person is then with you until you are into the drug testing room.
You find another gentleman, say, hey, okay, I'm ready to pee. They take you into a room, you wash your hands with basically just water, no soap.
And that's where it gets a little gnarly, I guess.
I have to pull my pants and my underwear down to past my knees.
You have to pull your shirt all the way up to your armpits.
If you're wearing your swimsuit, it's got to go all the way down to your ankles, your arms have to go up, and you have to do a 360 in front of this person. Oh yeah, it's all hanging out.
Someone would crouch down and they would get to the level of where the urine would come out of you.
The drug test guy is standing right there and watching the whole thing.
He's watching you pee into a cup.
So they're literally this close to your face while you're trying to tinkle.
The first time I ever got drug tested, no one told me that they had to watch at the same time. So, I'm like standing there with this little cup in my hand, and this lady's just like standing there staring at me, and I'm like, okay, you can go now. And she's like, no, I have to watch. And I was like, wow, this is really awkward.
Awkward, but essential. The United States Anti-Doping Agency's up-close and personal approach is part of its mission to preserve the integrity of competition, and its policies extend beyond the playing field. Athletes must constantly inform the organization of their whereabouts.
We basically go online and we fill out a calendar. And on that calendar, we have to tell them where we're going to be every day so that they can, come in for an unannounced drug test.
We can knock at your door at any moment, so you need to fill out this sheet and you need to tell us where you're going to be, if you go on vacation, what hotel you're going to be at, a phone number you can be reached at, the hours you're going to be there.
Let's say you're going to go to the mall and you're going to be there for 5 hours. You send them, say, hey, I'm going to the mall for 5 hours. I won't be at my residence.
We don't want you to go anywhere without us knowing where you're at.
And while athletes know that an unannounced visit could be coming, that knock at the door is never at the right time.
They always somehow schedule it, especially now when I'm giving my son a bath or right when I started to get him down for nighttime.
And I was literally leaving the pool deck to get Sid to school on a Friday morning, and I'm like, I have to go. And they're like, well, we're coming with you. I finally just said, could you help me get her ready for school? So I can try to give you a blood sample or a urine sample. I need help getting my preschooler ready for school. And they were like, okay. Yeah, it was great. So they literally fed her like the worst mom and braided her hair, and she looked really cute.
Timing is key in sports, even in testing.
I've just gotten out of the shower, just gotten done peeing, taking my morning pee, and I'm having my cup of coffee, and they show up, and I'm like, oh, guys, you missed me by 10 minutes.
I wake up every morning, and I usually, when first up, I look outside my window to see if there's any cars out there. That's the first thing I do. I don't go to the bathroom. I don't do anything like that. It's the first thing I do. If I see cars out there, I walk out to the car to see who it is, just in case. Because one time I didn't walk out, and I went to the bathroom, went pee, and then they knocked 2 minutes later, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
And while drug tests have become second nature to athletes, sometimes it can take forever.
After a hot tournament like the finals, you're pretty dehydrated. You could be there for a good 2 or 3 hours.
I just couldn't do it. And so finally the drug tester goes, do you have any beer? And I'm like, yeah, are you sure you should be drinking beer? Because like you're gonna have to drive home. And she looks at me and she goes, no, for you to drink the beer so you can give a sample so we can all go home. So I'm like, sure. So drank the beer, about half an hour later, gave the sample, and there you go. I had a great night's sleep.
To help me pee, a lot of the drug test individuals would turn water on, and they said that the sound of running water would make someone pee, and it worked, but unfortunately now, nearly 16 years later, I still pee whenever I hear the sound of running water. It's not good.
What color do you want to do? Blue?
While four-time gold medalist Janet Evans may joke about the interruption of family time, the concept was an idea she pushed for. Evans sat on the Athletes Commission of the World Anti-Doping Agency.
We sat in those meetings and we're like, there's no other way around it. You have to do out-of-competition testing. And it's interesting being a bureaucrat, which I was, because we would be like, oh, this is great. Like, they can just knock on the door at any time, and they can just go on, the athletes can go online and like log in, and they have their cell phones, and it all made sense to me, right? But now that I'm actually one of those athletes and living it, I'm like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? Like, this is awful. But, you know, it's not that bad, and they're very respectful, and it is what it is. So I'm all for clean sport, and I'll give as many samples as they need. But, no, I mean, it's just a part of the process.
And while part of the process might be uncomfortable, the overall process is something athletes not only understand, but support.
We are probably some of the cleanest athletes in the world, and we'll put it on the line anytime, any place. I love it when drug testers come because it lets me know that they value me as an athlete, and they just want to make sure that their best people are 100% clean, and you can show that to the world.
I do think that it is an invasion of privacy when you're drug tested. Absolutely. That being said, you know what you're getting into when you sign up to be an Olympian.
It's kind of like going through, I guess you could say, the security line at the airports. You know, it's a pain, it's intrusive, but at the same time, it's kind of what it is. It's what you need to do to maintain the integrity of the sport, or to make sure that we have, you know, that we can fly safe.
You know, that's just the life that we live as being an Olympic athlete, especially an elite Olympic athlete.
Common methods that are used for drug testing are urine samples and blood testing. And also a new test that we have seen is hair.
Rockhurst High School sent a ripple through this city when it announced its new drug policy. I recently sat down for an exclusive interview with Rockhurst, and for the first time, you get to see how testing is done. Rockhurst High School has done something no other school in our region has ever done.
We've decided after about a 2.5-year conversation, 2-year conversation, to implement a program of random and mandatory drug testing of all of our students, and it will begin in the fall of 2013.
This isn't a urine test or breathalyzer.
Test works. Clip a little bit of hair back here.
Dr. George Elder works for Psychomedics, the company doing the testing.
60 hairs, that's 50. If you weighed it, it's 50 milligrams of hair.
Anything ingested or used in the past 90 days shows up. Not just what you've taken, but how much. The company can take hair from anywhere on the body, almost.
So if a kid shaves his head, you can't avoid it. Arms, legs, underarms, never private areas.
If the idea makes you uncomfortable, you're not the only one. Principal Gregory Harkness has held dozens of meetings, fielded hundreds of emails, and heard from parents and students as well.
There's the students that think this is an invasion of privacy. Some parents think that they're taking the role of parenting away from them.
When they first announced it, there was lots of questions.
One of the most common questions, what will the school do with results?
Most high schools keep, files on students, of course. We have guidance files, we have disciplinary files, we have academic files.
Drug test results are put into a student's guidance file, which along with the student's disciplinary file is destroyed at graduation. The academic file is the only file ever sent to colleges or universities. The school will test for cocaine, PCP, opiates, methamphetamine, marijuana, and binge alcohol. No matter what substance is found, a first positive means a meeting with a guidance counselor and parents to decide how to get the student help. No administrators are told, and the student is given 90 days to get clean. School officials insist this isn't because of any specific problem at Rockhurst and not because of any one incident. Kids are resourceful, we know that. They explore and test limits, but the world has changed.
What's different today is the way an adolescent is resourceful is instead of 5 friends at school, we have 700 friends on Facebook. We have the ability to speak in a global community instead of a neighborhood community. And so the influences are very different today.
After more than 2 years of talking about it, answering questions about it, and now implementing it, it seems most are now on board with the new policy.
The parents are starting to get more comfortable with the idea, less threatened by it or less, not sure what's going to happen. They now know that the reasoning behind it is mostly for the health and welfare of the students.
Students realize that they're taking this seriously, and they're really just trying to help us.
So if we take a step back and look at our city, we talked to several area school districts and schools about their policies. In Oak Grove, for example, this is one of the schools we highlighted. On campus, if you take part in extracurricular activities, you are subjected to random urine testing or counseling is done on first offense. Now, in Blue Valley, it's a little bit different. In Blue Valley, the first offense can lead to police being called. There's a random, oh, there we go. It's random urine testing and counseling, that is, of course, in Oak Grove. And then we've got Blue Valley here, where you do the random breathalyzers occasionally. They tell us that hardly ever happens. And some counseling. That's Notre Dame de Sion. It does those random breathalyzers at school functions. But main goal is to teach stress management.
It's about their preparedness to go out into the world and be contributors to the world. And that means that they're eating right, they're getting enough sleep, they're making healthy choices.
I talked to KCMO today, and they admit their drug policy isn't strict. Those were their words. They say they have bigger issues in the District of Kansas City, Missouri right now. To read more about the policies we've just highlighted and the others on this list, and to hear what other administrators had to say, you can go to kshb.com. The information's there for you right now.